Hey everybody, this is Joel Tappan here. It's been quite some time, but a while back I released some videos that were instructional videos teaching users how to design their own VASSAL modules. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you a feature of the VASSAL Module Editor that is often not looked at, not used, and maybe you're kind of wondering, what is this thing for and where could it be find any kind of application. All right, what I'm going to look at here is the game piece image definitions. So if you look at the VASSAL Module Editor, this is the guy here that we're going to be looking at. The game piece image definitions. All right, so what is this feature? First of all, let me explain why it would be useful. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a VASSAL module for an individual. It's a private project. He scanned an unpunched copy of an older game that's long out of print. We're talking like, I think 1979, something like that. Anyway, so it's an old war game, and I've got a scan of the pieces here, and the pieces are just really, well, the scan's not the greatest here, and so looking to implement a VASSAL module for this. So one of the choices I have is I could use, the Adobe Reader here. I could be using this and cut out the little counters and save them as individual files. But one of the problems I was having with it is that they just didn't look very good. You can see here there's a lot of touch-up necessary. And it's just, I don't know, I just felt like it could use a little bit of a facelift. So I'm going to show you how you can go ahead and still implement these pieces into VASSAL without using a graphics editor. Okay? Now, there is no graphics program in VASSAL. So you need to understand that off the get-go. But there is this tool called the Game Piece Image Definitions. So I'm going to expand that in the editor. And inside there you'll find three basic folders. You'll find named colors. And if you right-click on that, you can add a named color. For example, I could just do sample. I could pick my color. I can type in the RGB code, or I can just use the swatches here. So let's just say I'm going to pick maybe a dark burgundy here and just call that sample and click OK. All right, so that's how you create sample color swatches. Now remember that, we'll come back to that in just a moment. There's also a folder for font styles, and I've already implemented a couple of these. There's a default font style, and then what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the game counters I'm trying to replicate, and I see that there's very large font that's used here for the movement and the combat strength. And so what I've done is I've defined a font, and I just chose basic Arial font, size 18, bold, and I called it strength and movement. I did a small font using Arial narrow because I need to incorporate some of the units, especially the tank units, have a lot of numbers in the unit designation. There's the parent formation, the unit formation, and so I wanted to be able to get all that in there, and so I like the narrow font for that. So I defined this style name, and I just call it small, so that when I'm creating the counters, I'll remember that small is these numbers and strength/movement is this number here. So I've defined some fonts, defined some colors. Now when you're done with this, you'll want to save the project. You'll need to exit out of the VASSAL editor and then reload the editor before you can implement these into game pieces. So make sure you've done that. Next thing I'm going to do is, and this is a project that's underway, it's not done yet. I'm kind of in the middle of it, and I thought, hey, I should shoot this video. So what you have in this third folder here is the game piece layouts. And so let me show you what I'm doing here. What I've got is I've got some game pieces that I'm defining. And what you do is, first of all, I could just go ahead and create a new game piece layout just to show you what it looks like. So if I right-click on the main folder here, click on that, I can define my game piece, the most basic elements. So the game piece, what artistically is it going to need on here? First of all, I'm making these counters, and I'm making them 60 pixels by 60 pixels. You can define a border for them, like fancy, plain. You can choose none. What I did, and I'll show you in just a moment, and then you can name the game piece layout. So I'm not going to save that. I'll show you what I've done here is I've created, because the layout for the armored units is very different than the layout for the NATO symbol units, I've created an actual layout folder for the Soviet armored fighting vehicles on the front side, the reverse side, and then NATO motorized, that would be these guys with the little wheels under the NATO symbol, and then NATO just without the motorization. All right, so let me show you what I did with the NATO without the motorization. So if I double click on this folder here, I've already defined a bunch of things. First of all, I started off and I told it no border style, and instead what I did is I added, by clicking on the image button, I added an image trait. And so that opens up this little context window down here. I can choose where to put the image and what image file on my computer I'm going to use. What I did is I'm using a blank, what I call su_blank.png. That is basically this brown that's been beveled. I did that in Photoshop. So I just have a 60 by 60 brown, same color as this, but all one color and with a nice 5-pixel bevel around the perimeter. And I make the image so it's fixed for this layout. What that means is every piece that comes under this folder will have this background, and it will be unchangeable for the individual pieces. If you click on advanced options, you can offset the image. You choose anti-aliasing and so forth. I'm not going to do any of that because basically what the function of this is this is the background. Like so much in VASSAL, the top is the bottom and the bottom is the top in terms of layering. So you make sure that if you're going to use an image as your background, you make sure that that is actually the topmost trait item in this particular layout. The next thing I want to add is the NATO symbol. And so I put a NATO symbol in here and I defined it. Now you'll see it's got division size. Don't worry about any of that for now. And then you can choose where you're going to place it. You can give this symbol a name. I just call it NATO for the name. That's just so whatever you type here is going to appear here. And it'll help you when you go to insert the individual pieces if you're a little more descriptive. So I call this NATO, so I remember that that's going to be the NATO symbol. I put its location as the center. If I click on the advanced options, you'll see that I offset it from the center on the y-axis by -5 pixels. So I moved it upwards by -5 pixels to get it kind of where I wanted it. Okay. The next thing I do, and this will be definable within the individual pieces. So that's all I got to do for the layout is just get it positioned. Next, strength and movement. That's going to be basically a label. So I added a label using this button. And if it wasn't clear earlier, to add the NATO symbol, I basically just click on this button here, symbol, and that's where the symbols come from. So if you add something in here and you want to remove it, you just click on it and click remove. You can also use the up-down buttons in order to reorder things in terms of layering. So the next layer from the bottom layer is the background, then the NATO symbol. Next we have strength and movement, and that is basically just a label trait. And it is positioned to be on the bottom, so it's going to be centered on the bottom. The font style. Now remember I defined those fonts earlier. So here's, using this drop-down box, I can pick which font I want. If I go with default, it's going to be really small. If I go with small, it's going to be even smaller. I'm just going to go with the strength and movement. The text I chose, you can have it fixed for this layout, but because everything's got slightly different ratings for the strength and movement, I chose to have it specified on individual images. If I chose to have it here, then I'd be able to apply that text. So I could go and type something in there and it would appear on all of the pieces would have that. But we don't want to do that, so I'm going to have it specified in the individual images. All right. For the advanced options, I have it offset by -3 pixels just to get it nicely positioned between the bottom edge of the bevel and the NATO symbol itself. So that's all for that. I made sure it's anti-aliasing so it's nice and smooth. The next one is the parent label. That's the parent organization. So some of these, the parent organization is going to be positioned, rotated 270 degrees to the left of the NATO symbol. So that's what I've basically done here. I told it to go with location top, which will center it along the top edge, but if you click on advanced options, you'll see I rotated it 270 degrees. So the top actually becomes the left. It takes some fiddling to figure out how all this stuff works, but it's once you get a hang of it, it's pretty easy to do. So top, if you're rotating it 270 degrees, is actually centers it on the left axis. I also offset it by 5 pixels using the x-axis because everything is tilted on its side. The x-axis, 5 pixels, will actually move it upwards by 5. I'm using the small font that I specified earlier, and I told it the text is specified in individual images. I essentially did the same thing. Let me go back in here. I did the same thing for the unit. That's going to be on the right-hand side of the counter. It's the same sort of thing. I told it to be on the bottom, but because I have rotated 270 degrees, it actually positions it to the right of the counter. And then I added a couple offsets to get the text centered between the bevel and the NATO symbol the way I want it. So that's the layout portion. I haven't entered any information for individual counters yet. That just shows me the fields that all of these numbers and text are going to go into. All right, so that's all done. Let me show you what an individual piece looks like. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do 33rd Tank Brigade, the 33rd Mech battalion of that. So basically I'm taking this counter here and I'm making it in VASSAL. Now I got to give it a name first of all. In order to create a new counter, let me just back up a little bit. To create a new counter, I just right click on here and choose Add New Game Piece, and bada bing, bada boom. This is what I end up with. All right, so let's just go ahead and create one that I haven't done yet. Let's go ahead and create, say, the 24th Cavalry, the 18th Regiment of the 24th Cavalry. So I've got to give this thing a unique name, because this is going to be like a file name inside the VASSAL images folder. So in the structure of the module, so you can't have duplicates of this. And you want to make sure it's something you can find later when you go to put these into your game piece palette. All you're doing here is defining a game piece, but you actually are going to have to put that into your palette later on so that the player, when he clicks on pieces, will find it. You'll see here I've got all these pieces defined, the images defined, but there's no piece defined using those images yet. All right, so let's go ahead and make this guy. We're going to call this SU. I like that for my abbreviation, Soviet Union. SU and then underscore. I'm going to tell it the 24 Cav, and then we'll do a dash 18. And so that basically will make me be able to find the 24th Cavalry Division's 18th Regiment. So that's what I'm going to call it. I can't really define anything for this image here. This is basically your background image. But remember NATO, I have this definable on the individual unit. So this is going to be, if I look at this, this is a regiment. So I need to click on this, the unit size, and I want to make it a regiment. So you'll see it puts in the regimental size up here. The next thing is a symbol. It's not infantry. We're going to go with cavalry recon to match this. Now, some game pieces, like for example, mech up here, you have to go with infantry, and then you use the second symbol field to put in armor, and that's how you get a mech symbol. For cavalry, we just need the slash, so that's all we're going to put there. Next thing, we go to strength and movement, and there's just sample text there for now. This is going to be a 6-H, according to the game piece here. We look at parent, and parent needs data here 24, and then we click on unit, and we put 18, and we have successfully replicated this counter. Now to dress it up a little bit, and you can change the color of the text using these fields here. So just, feel free to play around with it. I'm going to go back to the NATO symbol though here, and I'm going to make the symbol color would be actually the lines. So if I made that, say, orange, you'll see how that affected things. We don't want that. That's not a good combination. We're going to have everything stay black, but what I'd rather do is I'd rather change the background from clear to red, and that will match the others. So I'm just basically putting a nice little red background behind the NATO symbols for some contrast. And then I will click OK, and now we have defined a unit here. Now, how do I put this into my palette? Let me go ahead and just add a single piece to our pieces palette. I'll double click on basic piece. And whereas in the past, I would tell you double click on here, it opens up a file browser, and you point it to where on your hard drive the file is located. We're not going to do that here. Instead, you're going to click on this drop down box, and all of the images that are already in the module will be found in here. So all I've got to do is find the SU 24th cav. So I'll look down here to 24 cav, and this is why putting in everything in an alphabetic order makes it really easy just to go one by one down the line and put pieces in. And I can just call this Soviet 18th to the 24th cav. Click OK. I can add in all my other traits like delete, etc. All right, and now I've got my game piece in there. If I click on pieces and drag this away, you can see there's my game piece that I just created. If I copy and paste in here, now I can just go in and already that particular image is selected. So I click drop down, I can just move to the next one. And so that's how you can just very quickly insert images into the module from the game piece image definitions. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how I got these armored fighting vehicle images in here. First of all, I found a source for some silhouettes. I could do them just plain black like this if I wanted to, but using Photoshop, I can make them look a little nicer than that. So what I've gone ahead and done is I defined in my image definitions here, Soviet armored fighting vehicle front. You'll see I have my background. That's just basically the beveled square for the background. Then I have AFV, which is specified. It's an image that can be specified on the individual counters, on the individual images. And I have it positioned in the center. And then I've basically positioned the strength and movement the same. The parent formation is up here. The unit formation is over here. And so that's how the layout is done. Now on the individual pieces, when I go into this one, if I look at this, this is the 134th of the 46 Tank Brigade. And what I've gone ahead and done here is I go into the AFV field that I've defined, and then there's an image selection thing here, and I just click on that, and there's a file on my computer that I made. I know that my counters are 60 by 60, so I made my little silhouette guys. I made them 50, only 50 pixels wide, so that they will fit nicely centered on the game piece. So if you're dealing with any silhouettes or anything like that, it requires a little bit of planning. You'll have to artistically make something for that and then point that onto your game piece. But basically, this is the redone counter, and so you can see it's dressed up just a little bit. I could probably put like maybe a glow behind the tank, but I didn't want to put all that much work into it. But you could certainly do that. For other game pieces on the scan, like some of these, there's not a NATO symbol for these guys here. So what I'll do is I'll probably just go into Photoshop and just make something that looks really similar to that, and then I'll just point my browser to it and just have it layer on top of a NATO symbol that's just a plain square. And so just using a little bit of creativity, you can see how you can make the counters look kind of cool, actually. For pieces like this, where you have little dots in there inside the the cavalry symbol. What you can do with that is kind of what I did for the motorized dudes. And what I did here is I defined a couple shapes, and I called a wheel left, wheel right, and then I positioned them so that they would be, and you can't change it on each individual piece, but I positioned it in the layout so that they would be below the NATO symbol, and it's basically just a shape. So if you look at the layout here, you'll see I've added a shape. I told it to be an oval, 5 pixels by 5 pixels. I located it in the center, and then I used some offsets to get them exactly where I wanted them. And so there you have it. That's how you can actually define your own, you can basically make your own images with minimal graphics effort, especially when you're dealing with an old game like SPI or whatever, where there's just all NATO symbols. When there's like arrows and things like this, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of work, or I could just use the scan for like the arrows or the bridges. But I don't know. I just thought that the module could look a little better if I put a little bit of these image definitions in there. And in terms of time constructing the module, I got to tell you, the cost in time of individually cutting these out, saving them under a unique name, and then going back and having to punch them all in one by one, unless you use the en masse input. It's I actually think that this might be a little bit faster, because when you finished artistically depicting the piece, the image is already in the module. So inserting the game pieces is really quite fast when you go ahead and use the input procedure I just showed you, where you can just select it from this list. Again, be careful of your naming, and you'll not have any problems. One last thing I will show you on here is something you could run into. I'm going to create a copy of this particular image definition, and I'm going to attempt to save the module. And you'll see I got an error here. It says a problem was found in the module, more than one game piece named SU43MB, so forth. All right, you can save it anyways, or you can cancel. That's an error that will let you know you have a duplicate name somewhere in here. So again, remember, you can't have duplicate names. They have to have unique names in here. So now when I remove that and hit save, boom, there we are, and we're all good. So I'm Joel Toppin. That's my latest video on how to design VASSAL modules, and specifically how to use the game piece layouts feature in VASSAL Module Editor. Thank you for watching.